Well, welcome to the Future Human Experience podcast. We have a special group of guests today. We have Jaime and Azella. Jaime and Azella, welcome to
Thank you.
Future.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more. I mean, Jaime, we've had a chance to know each other for several years now.
Sure.
And then not only that, but your wonderful daughter has also been part of our relationship too, because we also have little ones too.
Which we got to get together.
Yes,
Yes.
we always try to get together.
All right.
But tell us a little bit more about, not only your journey, but your passion about bringing your children into these conversations when we talk about the future.
Yeah, so thanks for having us. Thanks for inviting Azella. I think one of the ways I communicate with her all the time is that I don't look at our relationship as a typical parent, tell you what to do, child relationship, right? This is more of a partnership. Yeah. And I try to give her the advice that I'm more of a guide than I am telling her what to do and what not to do, right? I'm here to guide and advise and do those things. And so we spend a lot of time together, and I don't talk to her any different than I talk to you, right? Yeah. It's the same level of conversation, same level of intellect. So I never have a problem with bringing her to places and doing these kinds of things because I know she does well. She actually does presentations in her classes and knocks them out of the park. As a matter of fact, during her last presentation, we're trying to decide what the project. So every presentation at her school has a written research, a written project, and then you do the some kind of physical project. And so when I came up with the one idea, I'm like, what about this? She shot it down with, she's like, Bobby, there's a certain level of expectation for me in my class that I have to meet because her presentations keep going up, right? Like one time we launched a space shuttle rocket with like fire and everything and like dry ice. And then we build a Burj Khalifa at scale to the Empire State Building. So we did all these things.
Yeah, we did ginormous things.
So we do great big projects. And so she's really good at presenting and communicating. And so I clearly it's a skill that she's got. And so I like to hone it as much as possible. So, but in terms of journey, so thanks for inviting us. I'm a first generation American, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York. Everyone who knows me knows that story. I spent a bunch of years working at Accenture, doing management consulting and organizational development work. And I ended up at Charles Schwab for a couple of years. And then I was at Google for 15 years. And at Google, I was part of the Google for Education team eventually. First couple of years wasn't what I didn't go to Google to do that work. I actually went to go work for the CIO. I went to go work as either a product program or a product manager for the internal engineering team. But then discovered Google Apps through work with ASU. We launched it at ASU. The rest is history. And then a couple years into that, had this crazy idea of launching Chromebooks in education, and that kind of took off. And I left in 2020, in the summer of 2020, mostly because, I was honest when I talked to people about this at the time and in my own videos about the idea that I saw Google as a dying company, mostly because it lost its culture, the core things. Like, for example, a great example would be when I joined Google, I was working for the CIO. And at some point, because of the stuff that was happening in education, I went to him and said, hey, I want to leave engineering, which is unheard of, right, at Google. I want to leave engineering and go be part of the enterprise team, sales team, and I want to focus on Google Apps in education. And he just smirked at me and he said, congratulations. And he says, it takes about 18 months to really find your role here. I'm like, and that Google didn't exist at the end, right? And there's lots of reasons why, mostly growth. Yeah. But so I left, and since I've been on a journey of self-discovery, I've been on a journey of discovering what it means to have the skills that we need for the future, about the consciousness work. I meditate twice a day. I was with a therapist, a couple different therapists, like things that I would have never done in my past. I've embraced as a way to kind of move forward. And from all that work in a Kendrick Lamar kind of way, I'm not going to battle anyone, but I have, reopened all these avenues of projects that I'm working on that I will be happy to talk about. So that's kind of my journey. She just showed up one day.
Hi.
So Azella, how's it been for you seeing your dad navigating all,
Being
this
home all the
work
time.
that he's been doing now, right? How has it been for you to see that and also join him on several of these efforts too?
It's really fun. I'm grateful that I get to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the most recent experiences that y'all are living through as a partnership too, right? Is that, Azella, I found out that you have your very first phone. Tell me a little bit more about that. How was that experience? Of
Wait,
you
well,
getting-
before you tell your experience, let me give you a background.
Okay, cool.
on it.
Okay, so let's understand how
So,
that happened.
her mom and I are divorced, and so Azella's with me for a week, and then with Jennifer, her mom, a week. Every week we switch back and forth, roughly.
Roughly.
Right, and so the communication is an issue, and so she's got her iPad, and we usually do good with her iPad, talking to her that way. And one day, Jennifer and I decided, like, okay, it's time. This is back in December. Let's get her phone. Let's get her a phone. She needs a phone so we can communicate with her. So I picked her up from school. She gets in the back of the truck, and I'm like, hey, guess what? I'm driving home, and I said, your mom and I talked, and I think it's okay. I think we want to get you a phone so that we can communicate with you. She pauses in the back seat. She goes, nah, I don't want one. I'm like, what? No, I don't need it. Why would I want a phone? I'm just gonna lose it. It's just gonna get in the way. I don't want it. So literally, like the only kid in America who ever said no to a cell phone, right? And now we got to a point where we're about to start the summer. She's gonna go with her mom for 3 weeks, then be with me for 6 weeks, and then with her mom for another 3 weeks, and I get her back. And so it'll be a lot of off time. And it's just, we need a better way to communicate. So on Wednesday, one of these nights, Thursday, we went. Thursday, we went and got her phone.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's been 3 days that she's had her phone.
How's the experience been, Azella, using the phone?
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Okay.
It's like a mini iPad.
I mean,
Mini iPad.
I don't see the difference.
You don't see the difference.
There you
yet?
go. That's
Well,
an
you will.
interesting
But
perspective.
we've been talking about
Yeah.
rules, right? We've been talking about what I don't like even like the word rules. We're talking about guidelines,
Yes.
right? Like these ideas around like, do your kids have phones?
No, my kids are not.
No, okay. How old are your
But they
kids?
want phones.
They want.
So Gio is your age,
Right.
and Sienna's a little bit younger. But
Right. Yeah. So it's a different situation too. But
Sure.
we have been talking about like the proper use of phone.
Yeah.
And I talk to parents about this all the time, where they tell you, like, what about these kids and their phone? And that's a whole rant that I can go off on. And we can also, if you want to write down a note on like this idea that the problem with our kids is their phone, which isn't true.
Right.
But we've been talking about these guidelines around like, and when I talk to parents, that it's okay to have boundaries. It's okay to have rules. It's okay to have, expectations for how your kids should use their device. So, for example, one rule is, our guidelines, we don't use the phone at the dinner table, right? Like we don't eat with our phones. And that's not just for kids, that's for everyone.
Right.
And if I pick up my phone, she'll say something. She'll hammer me on it.
Hey.
Yeah. She'll make me put down the phone. Like, so we have to hold each other accountable. So it's going to be an interesting experience for her to have a phone. Here's the thing about phones, right? Like, phones are programmed to feed short attention spans, right? And so that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it has to be a balance. And so I want to make sure that she's got that short attention span working well, but that she's also got long-term thinking in terms of like reading. And so, we went to the bookstore and bought some physical books that she's got to read for the summer. One she's got to do a book report on, and the other one she wanted to read. So it's that balance that I tell parents, and mostly modeling behavior, right? I think a lot of times our kids look at how we use things, and then they do the same thing. And so oftentimes when you see a kid using their phone all the time, it's usually because their parents, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you notice too?
Mm-hmm. Oh, also another guideline that we use is you cannot, this is mostly for you, but you can, because I never had the phone before, but you cannot not use a phone when we're watching a movie, because you always do that.
Yes, I do. And so she busts me when I do that. or unless I say something like, oh, let me look that up. Like we're watching something and I need to look it up. Like we were watching.
We were watching Star Wars.
No, last night. We were watching Talking.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen Stop Making Sense.
No.
So
Okay.
Azella's a musician.
Okay.
She's a singer. And in a couple years, she's going to say, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to go to LA and be a star. And I'm going to be like, okay. So she loves that. And so we watch concert movies every once in a while. So we watch Stop Making Sense by the Talking Heads.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so you asked, like, how old was he? And so that's the great thing about the phone, right? You can look something up real quick, right? It's the using the device for its attention rather than a distraction.
Yeah. Azella, do you see yourself using like an Apple Watch soon? Like, is that something that you are thinking of getting and just
Well-
saying, oh, it's just a smaller iPad, a smaller phone, but just a
smaller
smaller,
phone.
yeah.
Just a little tiny phone.
What do you think?
Well, I remember when I had my Garmin watch, and I lost it the second week that I had it.
Okay.
Right. But it was a great watch.
That's a
I don't
cool
know,
watch.
you know,
Really
do you
good
have
watch.
that?
My sister-in-law has a watch. She's a runner.
Right. So they have Garmin watches for kids.
Oh, I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't want to give it high praises because the issue was that a year later the battery basically died on it and it would last half a day.
Okay.
But for that first year, it was hugely
cool.
effective because you could actually set up a geofence, and so if the kid left that area, you would get a notification.
Yeah.
You could set up so you could set it up so it doesn't ring or disturb her during certain times, right? And so it was a great way to communicate. That's what we're trying to do with this, communicate. And it worked well for a while, but the battery just didn't last all day like it did.
We lost it, then we found it, then we lost it again, and then we found it.
I like the
and then
Wii part.
battery
I like the Wii. I like how that's a partnership.
Well, yeah, you said it was a partnership.
Okay.
There you go.
Right.
So, Azella and Jaime, so as you all are talking about technology and the role technology gets to play in your relationship, and technology at the rate that it's moving really fast. What are some things that you are looking forward to seeing technology have that's going to improve the relationship that y'all have and how you're utilizing it?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Well, what do you see in the future of technology?
Ooh, I don't know.
You don't know.
What would you like to see?
I'm old, so I like the jetpack. I'm still waiting for a jetpack, right?
To get you
water
to get the
jetpack.
kids closer to you?
Yeah.
Or
Well, just a jetpack to travel. We can travel back and forth.
Okay.
Water jetpack.
A water jetpack,
I mean,
okay.
Or maybe flying. I'm pretty sure that flying cars may be a little more popular now.
Sure.
Or Waymos may be just normal cars.
Those pass by.
Right. So
your dad's house all the time,
we
right?
drive. So that's what we travel in.
Yeah.
I have this great video clip. If you remind me, I'll share it. You can
Yeah.
add it to this. But it's
We could add it in the comments. Like,
Yeah.
it's an awesome
There's
clip.
a video clip of being in a Waymo car with so I have 3 kids, right? So I have a 32-year-old and a 31-year-old and a 22-year-old and Azella. And so my daughter, who lives in New York, she was in Phoenix. While she was living in Phoenix, she was with her partner, and I had kind of sprung on them. I didn't tell them this is what we're going to do. I'm like, come on, we're going to get a ride. And I threw them in the back seat with Azella, and we drove to dinner in downtown Phoenix. Now, this is Azella at this time, I don't remember, 3rd, 4th, 5th ride or something at that point. Okay, listen, it doesn't, yeah. So she's been doing it for a while. And this very great video clip of my daughter and her partner losing their mind. Like, oh my God, how's it doing it? Like watching the car drive itself. And Azella's like, yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like bored out of her mind.
I actually remember just staring out the window, waiting for the ride to be over.
So in her world, a self-driving car is normal, right? Like that's just baseline now.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, she'll be taken into school probably next year, right? Like, why not? Why,
Sure.
Like, if I can't take her to school and I gotta be somewhere, I can just drop her in a Waymo and take her, right?
Absolutely.
I honestly trust a Waymo more than I would trust some stranger in a car, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the...
Or you. I trust the Waymo more than you.
Yeah, she tells me that Waymo drives better than I do. Yeah.
And just to give some folks some context, right? So we live, all 3 of us live here in Phoenix. So Waymo has been here now for
A couple years.
Yeah, I was here for a long
like-
time. But what's really cool about Waymo here is that one of the reasons why they built it out here, one of the first cities that they built it out, is because Phoenix is a grid, right? It's a very easy way to navigate here, Phoenix, right? So if you miss an exit, you just take the next exit and turn back around, right? Versus if in New York or down in Houston, if you miss an exit, you have to like drive another 30 minutes to figure out how to turn back around, right?
Right.
So it's a very different place here. And also the weather is conducive here to kind of do some
Sure,
testing.
it's a good place. Well, it's a good place to test lots of technology and products. I mean, the Valley's got a lot of technology that most people don't know about. A lot of data centers. I mean, Amex's entire multi-gazillion-dollar data centers here, right? So the weather is a huge factor. I think what's interesting about Waymo is the experiences have been mostly good, but there's been some issues. Like remember when we were trying to take it back from a basketball game, went to a basketball game, and it was a playoff game last year, and so it was packed. And so lots of cars. So we ordered a Waymo, and the Waymo was trying to come across, but there was so much traffic that
it just stopped.
It doesn't have an aggressiveness to it, right? You know, like you don't, you don't
commit to that.
You don't commit and close your eyes and hope. Like Waymo sit there until it finds an opening. So there was a car sitting there, and cars would just kept going, and it was our car, but we couldn't go to it because it wouldn't open its doors. It had to pull over. But it literally, like for 20 minutes, could not come over because it doesn't have an aggressive. It doesn't have an aggressiveness to it.
Yeah, and it just stopped there.
It stopped, and then it just canceled itself, and then took off. So we had to walk to another area. So there's lots of bugs still that needs to be worked out.
So did you recognize that bug, Jaime, as it was happening, or was it just like?
I recognize.
What about you, Azella? Did you notice what was happening?
Yeah, I noticed it as well.
Yes.
Oh, really?
So I recognize tech bugs all the time. I actually give it feedback all the time.
Okay.
So Waymos don't park in a parking lot the way most other things happen, like taxis, right? Are in taxi stands or whatever. The Waymos use residential neighborhoods to park their car, and there's one sitting in front of our house all the time.
Yeah, the dogs would always bark.
And not Luna, but the other dogs, but.
Your conspiracy theory.
My conspiracy theory is that I pissed off some engineer at Google that transferred to Waymo, and he purposely knew where I lived and parks these Waymo cars in front of my house. Now, that being said, everyone's like, how do you, most of the neighbors are like outraged that these cars parked in front of their houses because they're running. Well, one, they are running, but they're electric, so they're not really running, right? There's no gas coming out of them. And two, there's nobody in them, right? And three, I look at it as I have this $200,000 surveillance vehicle in front of my house. Nobody can break into my house or steal things from my house without me calling Waymo going, hey, I need all the video footage that your car was shooting in my neighborhood, right?
Yeah, literally all cameras.
Yeah, it's a whole giant camera.
Literally a car covered in cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about Waymo for me is the level set that we have, right? So you and I grew up with cars already, right? We didn't have to adapt to stagecoaches not being around anymore or horses not being used anymore. Azella's growing up in an environment where you have to start asking real questions like, why would she get a driver's license? Why would she drive? Why would she own a car when she can just literally walk outside and get into the self-driving vehicle and take her anywhere we want?
Yeah, one of the best use cases for self-driving cars are actually the retirees, right?
Yeah.
Folks that, hey, I need to go and get some medical attention or go to the pharmacy to get their medicines or what have you, because we have a lot of retarees here in the Valley.
Right.
And so that's a wonderful use case for them in a safer way, safer environment for them to go, get their medical care, go where they need to go, and in a safe.
I mean, you can make the same argument about Uber and other things too, but I think what's interesting about Waymo, and here's how it's related to education is this, which is, and this is the mismatch that we have in education. This ties into skills, right? So I love like getting into either taxis, especially on the East Coast, taxis or Ubers, and talking about self-driving cars, or talking to other people about self-driving cars who are like, I will never get in a I would never let a machine drive like I drive. They think that they're better at this than the computer is, right? Yeah. So that's the irony, is that humans are humans who think that they don't trust the technology and that they believe they're better at the skill at driving than a computer would be. Yeah. When in reality, it's the opposite, right? Which is what humans are good at and what they should be good at aren't those technical, detailed skills. What humans are good at is coming up with creative patterns on how to create technology that gets a little more aggressive to come into that lane so that they can pick up their ride. Right? So it's funny what humans are like, this technology is coming to take our jobs, right? And the truth is, they are.
Yes, yeah.
But you're doing the wrong work, right?
So let's talk about that a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the role technology has to play through the intersection of education. What I love also about the work or the partnership that y'all have with Azella too is Azella, you're also a Montessori student, right? Very similar to my little ones too. So that's been an intersection that we've had as parents. Tell me a little bit more about how do you feel like a Montessori kid having that experience in schools? How do you feel having that experience, and what does technology play a role in your schooling?
So actually, kinda. So we have Chromebooks, computers that sometimes we can use because we have school jobs that we do, kind of like chores.
Yeah.
But and some of those are for like attendance. Sometimes last year we typed and like we wrote our presentations on Chromebooks, so we would use
Awesome.
Chromebooks for testing as well.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
So what do you like about being in a Montessori school?
I love being with other people that are not always my same age.
Yeah.
So you like
That's
the mixed
different.
ages, right? So that's one of the
Right.
factors, right? I think that's an interesting model for education in general, right? Like, why do we have grades?
Right.
Like, why are all 8-year-olds and all 9-year-olds and all 10-year-olds kept the same?
Right.
Like, how do you, like, what, show me one business somewhere in the world where everyone's the same age in a meeting, right? We all come in with different experiences. And so Azella, and again, what's the best way to learn? The best way to learn is to teach, right? And so you have a group of third graders teaching second graders and first graders the things that they're learning. And so it's important for them to be able to pass on that information. Right. And so they learn through that process of learning, right? And so that's one of the things. What don't you like about being in a Montessori school?
Basically the same thing, except opposite, because I'm also crammed with a bunch of 28 lab students.
Right.
So
Fair
there's
enough,
also
yeah.
that fact about it.
Right.
There's a sense of chaos sometimes in a Montessori classroom.
That's a good word
But
for
it's
it.
also like
Controlled.
controlled, right? Like I
Controlled
think
chaos.
the first time I went into a Montessori room, I was like, someone's gonna poke my eye, I'm gonna get something thrown at me. But then after several years of doing the class visits, you're like, oh wow, I see Azella doing that work, I see Gio doing that work, I see like, and you just see these different works that are happening, because you just have a different perspective on what a classroom or learning experience could look like.
Right, which is interesting because most office models still to this day. I remember when we went from like very closed off cubicles for individuals to a more open work environment space, right? And for a while, people had a hard time adapting to that, right? To being in an open environment because there were so many distractions. Azella and those kids are fine with it, right? They're good at open spaces, and a lot of that culture came from both Larry and Sergey being Montessori kids, right? And that's all they knew was how to create work environments that were open like that.
That's right.
And so you have to come up with strategy. So I have severe ADHD. It's one of the things that I've been diagnosed with in the last 3 years, and most people, when I say, hey, I got ADHD, most people are like, duh, like, did you not know that? And I honestly didn't. Like, I didn't. And she's undiagnosed, but clearly is, just from the characteristics. And so in those environments, you have to learn ways to keep focus. And it's great because what's great about Montessori is they don't, here's your work, good luck, right? It's not like, did you do page 1? Did you do page 2? Did you do page? They're very.
Yeah. They give you an assignment and you have to do it by a certain day.
Right, and they don't tell you how to do it.
Right.
It's unique to your journey, how you want to approach it. Okay.
And so you struggled at the beginning to because of your traits and conditions that you would wait till the last minute to try to get everything done and you couldn't.
Yes.
And then you learn how to balance that, and you've learned how to manage the noise. They have noise canceling headphones that they can put on, and so it's a great way to learn how to adapt to those kinds of environments.
There's like 5 ways to solve our problems.
Exactly, right? There's different ways, and then you feel fine navigating any of those, right? Do you feel comfortable with that? Okay.
Yeah, it's fun.
Are you excited to go to the next grade level now that you get to, because now you're moving at upper elementary,
now I'm moving up
right?
after 3rd grade.
That's
so now
right.
I'm going into 4th, 5th, and 6th.
So
Now you're the first grader again.
Yeah, exactly. That'll be fun.
You're the first grader again.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
But you're excited. You were ready.
I'm excited.
Yeah, she was ready to move on to the next level.
So with that said, Jaime, I mean, not only have you seen your daughter thrive in this type of environment, also you've seen your other children also have different learning experiences. What is your aspiration for not only where education could go, but also understanding and honoring kind of where we have been? Like, what are some of those challenges that we see in education today, and why are they like? If we know that programs like the Montessori programs are wonderful and adaptable, where the future work is being built, what are some of the challenges for that to be just more prevalent and accessible for communities today?
That's a great question, because I think we have to honor and recognize the impact that education has had on society in general, right? I think we've done a disservice in thinking that education is about preparing people for work, right? Education is about preparing you, period, for life, right? It's about being able to give you a studio, a lab, a place to experiment, to learn things so that you can go put them out into the real world. And so I always like to throw this out to people because it freaks them out. But I'll get up and talk at an event, and I will say sometimes that education's not broken. And people are like, wait, what? That's all we talk about. What are you talking about? Like, that's what we bitch about is that education is broken. I'm like, it's not broken, actually. If you look at it from the perspective of what it was designed to do, it does it better than it ever has, right? And these stats are pre-COVID, and I haven't looked or dug through the stats for the future or past COVID, but graduation rates were the highest that they ever were. Graduation rates for Black and Latino students were the highest they've ever been. Technically speaking, I know it doesn't seem like this could possibly be true, but IQ scores keep going up every 10 years, right? The work that we do in schools, even traditional schools, is 10 times harder than it was when I was in school, right? So education isn't broken. It's that the world is significantly different than it was when education was set up 150 years ago. Education is doing what it was designed to do, which is create a group of people with enough basic knowledge to be able to live and work in factories and work and be told what to do. And then you need about 20 or 30% of the population to actually have an advanced degree so that they can tell those people what to do and create the systems, right? That was the education model. It's still doing that. The problem is that we don't live in that world anymore, right? And so why are we preparing students for a world that doesn't exist? And I think that's the core thing. So here's the call out to education is we don't need to create anything new. We can build off the back and build off the shoulders of the people who came before us in education and build the systems that we need. Take the best ideas that we have forward and then add to that. And there's nothing that we need. We know what good learning looks like. We know what good mentorship looks like. We know what skills students need. It's just a question of the will. Do we have the will to implement these things? And even Montessori has its growth areas that it can build into. I've talked to them. I've worked with schools in the Montessori system. I've worked with their leaders, and there's spaces that they need to work in as well, right? And so I think what we need to think about is this, right? The purpose. What's the purpose of education? And I think we miss the mark when we say the purpose of education is to prepare students for their future. The purpose of education is to give kids skills that they need now. What I mean by that is I have a hard time with this idea that if you ask teachers in elementary school, when you talk about homework, for example, one of my favorite topics, why do you give kids homework? Well, we're preparing them for high school. And then you go to high school and you're like, why are you doing this rigor and all this hard work in high school and AP classes? Well, we're preparing them for college. And then you go to college and what are you doing in college? Well, we're preparing them for their job. At what point do we just let kids live in their present, in their moment, in their space, right? And I think if we can turn that into that as opposed to preparing for something in the future, right? I think we can get closer to the truth of what education should be about, which is a constant and consistent learning process, right? A model where you're constantly learning. And so I think that the big issue in education is around this idea that we have to have a moment of pause to say, what is the purpose of education? And the purpose of education is to give kids the skills that they need to constantly learn, right? And so when you think about homework, does homework do that? Do grades do that? Do grade levels do that? those things aren't about students.
Right.
Those things are about adults. Those things are about people, right? We have homework, right? So that we don't have to teach those things in class. We have grades so we can categorize everyone and put everyone in different categories, right? We have grade levels so we can organize it, but it has nothing to do, tell me how that benefits students, and you can't, right? And so I think what we need to do is pause and understand that the purpose of education is to give students the skills that they need now for today. Those are skills that our students need today, not for something in the future. They need them today.